Welcome to Royal Exclusive News. Today's top story, King Charles' patience is once again becoming a topic of discussion. In this video, we explore the latest reports, what's putting the monarch under pressure, and why this story is attracting so much attention.
Welcome to the show. We start with the ultimate royal rejection. Palace aides say the King's patience has been tested beyond endurance after a dithering Prince Harry missed a strict deadline to stay at Buckingham Palace, sparking a furious briefing war over whether the Duke was set up to fail. And to add to insult to injury, Harry had to endure a crushing defeat in his lawsuit against the Mail, leaving his reputation and possibly finances in ruins. Plus, Andrew's infamous Pizza Express alibi is back in the headlines after an extraordinary investigation into whether he really was in Woking all those years ago. Are we any closer to knowing the truth? We'll also look at how Prince William has dropped his dad right in it ahead of England's massive World Cup clash. I'm Matt Wilkinson, Royal Editor of The Sun, and joining me to unpack it all are Royal Editor at The Times, Kate Mancy, and host of podcast Unfiltered, Kinsey Schofield. Welcome to you both. Look, guys, finally, after weeks and weeks and weeks of chat, the circus has rolled into town. Within a few short hours, Harry had been accused of causing the King's patience to snap, and he lost what is ultimately a humiliating £50 million court case. For many years, we respected Harry as Captain Harry Wales, when he served in the army. Surely now he is just becoming Captain Chaos. Is this chaos and drama that we are seeing just in a few short hours of you arriving, all the drama, the noise, is that just what we now have to expect? Is that just part of the deal for every time Harry comes to these shores?
Well, I don't think that Harry thought that it would reflect so poorly on him this visit. I'm under the impression that he thought that this was going to be his redemption tour, and he had all of these engagements lined up because he wanted positive headlines. But the reality is he just can't get out of his own way. And I think that he acts without thinking ultimately about the consequences. And you ask yourself, do you have the right team around you that walks you through every possibility? If you do this is the way that it might unfold for you, and you might embarrass yourself. But it does seem like chaos continues to follow him, and I think we've seen him trying to rebuild his brand over the last 6 to 12 months between Ukraine, the letter he wrote in the New Statesman regarding anti-Semitism in the UK. He wants to be taken as a serious character. And then a week like this happens, and he loses all authority, all credibility. And a judge says, I didn't trust your testimony. And that wreaks havoc on that.
Well, we'll get on to the Buckingham Palace farce, and it is a farce, whether he was going to stay there or not. And we'll get on to, the repercussions of losing this case. But Kate, before we do that, I remember, I was looking at what's happening to Harry in the last couple of hours or the last couple of days. I remember a couple of years ago, you wrote a story that the palace were dubbed Andrew and Harry the same nickname. What was it?
It was Dukes of Hazzard. That's the name that they had for Andrew and Harry, because Hazzard, chaos, followed both of them. And they were the two big problems that were pointed out to me by courtiers as, big kind of hurdles for the king during his reign, and big kind of, alarm signals flash every time their names were mentioned. But to your point about, do we expect this or chaos every time Harry comes? Well, yes, we do, because I think what we've seen, and people I'm speaking to and you're speaking to at the palace, I think it's a pattern of behaviour. Harry announces he's going to come for weeks beforehand. There's briefings from his camp about what's going to happen. Maybe the children will come. He wants to bring the children. Then we have the familiar row over security, despite the fact that he lost his legal battle to have automatic right to UK police security. Last year in the Court of Appeal, it always seems to be a kind of a pressing, and it's always presented, isn't it, as a kind of an urgent and pressing issue, despite the fact that he does have security, albeit on a case-by-case basis. Now, it does seem to be that every time he comes, palace courtiers just get more and more weary about it. And I think, the public do too, because they sort of think, well, here we go again. Here we go again.
Let's break down the Buckingham Palace scenario. How hard can it be? seriously, this is a vast building, okay, albeit it has staff and you've got the complications of the King and Harry, but for weeks we were told that the offer had been made from the palace, from the King, for Harry to stay there, and that he would ultimately accept. But it seemed to be, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think the scenario was the deadline was Friday. On Saturday morning, he said to the palace he didn't want to stay there. Then on Saturday night, he changed his mind. I mean, how can this go so badly wrong?
Please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to Royal Exclusive News. Your support helps us bring you the latest royal news and exclusive updates.
Guys, just to be able to get a room at Buckingham Palace.
It's a catastrophic kind of communication breakdown, isn't it? I mean, between father and son.
Do you not think it's a control issue where Harry wants to tell people at the very last minute because he doesn't like giving his itinerary? He doesn't like for people. He's afraid that they'll leak what's going on, so he's in control if he holds on to this for until the very last minute. And then, you know, I saw your article on Saturday about Harry not getting his Ravik security, and that seemed to be when the spiral began, the leaks about, well, now I'm not bringing the wife and the kids. And I think that there was a tug of war between Harry and his security team, who probably said, look, we're going to sit you down and the truth is, there's no safer place in the world for you to be than Buckingham Palace. And I think that's when he finally changed his tune and said, well, fine, I guess I'll stay there. But, I mean, what a wild ride.
I think people will think, come on, it's a huge palace. Surely the King can, you know, dust off a few dust sheets. OK, there's building work going on. There's this big £369 million resurfacing programme going on. We've been in there recently. You know, huge parts of the palace still off limits because there's building work taking place and people with hard hats working away. But, you know, there is room for Harry. So there were a couple of things going on, wasn't there? First of all, the King lost patience. He gave him a deadline. That offer had been open for weeks, and Harry hadn't had the courtesy to tell his father. The King said, you've got to decide by the end of the week, so presumably, you know, end of business hours on Friday. He comes in late on Saturday, first of all saying he doesn't want to stay, then changing his mind. And the King clearly, as you've written, snapped and lost patience and said, you know, we can't be messing the staff around because as a courtesy to staff who then had been stood down, he wasn't about to get people to ring up and say, oh, by the way, can you make those rooms available? There was the added complexity, of course, of the fact that the day that Harry wanted to stay at the palace, he was going to be receiving that judgment, which I'm sure we'll come on to, of his case against Associated Newspapers Limited, who publish a Daily Mail and the Mail on Sunday. And I think that, you know, there were a lot of minds within the palace that was concentrating their minds as to what would he say when that judgment came out. Would he be broadcasting from within a room at Buckingham Palace? And given that he hadn't made the deadline, you know, they weren't about to extend it on that basis.
Well, there was lots at play, as you talked there, Kate. You know, we'll get on to the case in a minute. But it was discussing earlier, it's classic behaviour from Harry. He wanted to leave it up to the last minute. But also classic behaviour from the King. He wants things to be organised. He's got staff that he wants to be places. And he probably just gets to the stage and goes, well, I've got so many balls in the air. I've got staff here. I need to go to Highgrove, to Sandringham, to Buckingham Palace. I've just run out. And I'll give you the quote. This was a royal aide, said that the King's patience snapped. And that sounds like the King, to be fair. He said he wants to be a loving father and grandfather, but that was being tested beyond endurance. He was not willing to be pushed around nor indulge a constant state of, back to the word again, chaos.
Well, and I can tell you that my understanding from the audience online is relief. People were thrilled that the King took this stance, and some, you know, finally saying, or some saying he finally had a backbone. It's rude. It's rude to wait to the last minute to say what you're going to do. And also you have to keep in mind, I mean, I know that they have a lot of resources, but for the last few weeks, the palace had been organizing a staff to support a family of 4 plus an entourage. And then here comes Harry saying, no, it's just going to be me. Well, they would have to re-strategize his entire stay, along with calling up the chef again or making sure that the food and beverage are there to entertain one person and a few of his security guards. But it just threw everything into chaos. It just threw everything up in the air. And, you know, I think that that's unfair to do to them at the last minute.
Do you think that Harry was triggered by the fact that he was offered the spare room?
Was he?
That was a joke.
Or was that a joke? Well, if it wasn't as big as Williams, I loved it. I like your jokes.
Well, let's move on to the media case. Look, it's quite tricky. Obviously, you know, he's sued lots of media organisations. He's sued mine. He's sued the Mirror newspaper. He's won in the past. This was, I think it was an 11-week trial. He came over and gave evidence. This was against the Daily Mail group. He lost all 57 claims of illegal news gathering. Actually, there was other claimants, Elton John and David Furnish, and
I think he was 14, right?
Yeah, so I think he was just 14. I think. But look, there was attacks on journalists. It went on for ages. It was incredibly stressful for everybody. He's now this week in London asking for press to turn up and cover his events. I mean, what's your take on this situation, guys?
Well, I mean, this was a huge defeat for Harry because the judge came back.
What are your thoughts on the latest discussions surrounding King Charles? Share your opinion in the comments below. If you enjoyed this update, please like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss our latest royal news.